Okay, hello. So, um, okay, question here. How do you illustrate a gabbled roof?
I'll answer these questions as you go through them, Mimi. We wouldn't actually really expect you to show the roof of a property on the floor plan. We are looking at a general structure and layout of the property. It isn't to show features of kind of how the roof would be um, represented or drawn, or kind of how the roof is. It's very much like where the layout of rooms actually is and what rooms are being used for. Also things like, as Mimi said, structural things that are stuck in, like kitchen utilities, bathroom utilities, any fireplaces. The roofs and the kind of roof extensions that you may get, or you would only need to show them if there is a kind of reduced head height, which I think may be what you're suggesting to. And if that is the case, then a dotted line, I'm just saying reduced head height in the area where it is slightly reduced and you can't stand up in that area, is the best way to describe it. We would then kind of put the same kind of dashed lines on the floor plan, on the final version of the floor plan, and we might say restricted head height. But generally, anything like that, you usually see it in kind of loft extensions. So if it was labelled loft bedroom and had some dashed lines that showed it, then that would also represent what that means. So I think I've answered your question there, but if I haven't, please just re-ask the question, and I'll see if I can. I'll see if I got it right.
Yeah, that was really clear. Thanks, Chris. Another good question. How do you account for varying internal wall thicknesses? Example, my trial job had an internal garage with solid fireproof walls.
Oh, excellent. Yeah, so generally we don't need you to do all of the wall thicknesses. However, if you do go around and measure the external walls of a property, kind of as you're inside the property, but measure all of the external walls, this sort of stuff kind of does come out in the wash. So what I mean by that is, if you feel like you've got a particularly awkward property, or you've got a property that does have anything that you can visibly see thicker walls, then make sure you measure the room and the floor area in the room, and then we have that information, and that's the core information that we need in order to be able to draw it. And if it's something that is obviously noticeably thicker, draw it as thicker. And you might want to, again, if there's my general advice would be, if there's anything in a property that you believe is a big selling point, or something that the vendor or estate agent are particularly proud of, that they're going to want to mention on the floor plan, then this is a tool that is being used to help sell the property. So it is worth you putting kind of an arrow and a note to point to that specific thing. It's not very often that you find really thick walls that are fireproof, but if that has happened on your trial job, then maybe there's quite a few in your area. But generally, just anything that is a little bit outside of the norm, it's best we have the information than us not having the information. So just add it to the floor plan, and we will represent that information in the best way possible in the final plan.
Cool. That's great. Next question. I know you read this, but I'm not sure if you answered or not. So the measurements, is it in meters or centimeters?
It's entirely up to you on how you want to do measurements. Centimeters, feet, inches, whatever is best for you to show it to us. We can input it into our floor plan software in any of those measurements. So the main thing that kind of comes up is if you're using graph paper. Graph paper is set up in a kind of square meters. So if you are using graph paper, we would assume meters. However, sometimes people do draw it on graph paper to show how it's structured and then change the measurements to feet and inches. So it really does depend on your own working style. We can receive it in any way. It wouldn't change how we're drawing it.
Well, that's great. Thank you, Chris. Next question. Should you take a landing measurement?
Yeah, especially if you have the main thing is that if you actually go back to the floor plan, I might be able to describe this a little bit better, Mimi. If you could just get the floor plan up that you were showing before.
Give me 1 second.
What often happens is if we have all the measurements for the other rooms, the landing kind of just creates itself. So this one, with the exception of the cupboards, we have all of the left-hand side of the property. And then if you have a look at the bedroom, the 2 bedrooms at the top, we have the bedroom kind of depth there as well. We also have the bathroom measurement there at the bottom. So we know that the landing length is the kind of the space between the bedroom and the bathroom. We wouldn't include the measurements on the final floor plan for the landings. And it's actually usually a client preference as to whether the measurements are included on the final floor plans anyway. But generally, in order to draw the property in the best structural possible in the actual floor plan software, we don't always need the landing measurements if we have the surrounding room measurements. And I think that this floor plan describes most of what I mean, with the exception of us just missing those cupboard measurements there. On this plan, it would have been nice to have from the bedroom to the bathroom. However, that's exactly the same as the floor underneath, where if we were to have lounge area to kitchen, so hallway to kitchen there, we would have been able to understand the exact size of that property, because the hall and the bedroom kind of go on top of each other in a corner. And we would double check that by looking at the photos. But I would, I don't want to give you a yes or no answer to should you include the landing. Most of the time we don't need the landing. However, if you get a big L-shaped landing, or it's you know, it's quite a messy house, sometimes you get some quite odd structures. I would say that if you measure the walls around the landing, you should be fine.
Cool, that's great. Thank you, Chris. Regarding your point on fireplaces, do you require measurements for these?
No, and I think I've seen similar questions in related to windows as well, so I'll address this at the same time. All of the icons that you add in terms of windows, doors, fireplaces, kitchen tops, sinks, baths, you don't need to measure the actual the actual utility at the property. We just need it as a guide. If the fireplace is a huge fancy Victorian fireplace and is a massive selling point to the property, then don't just draw it as a small fireplace. It might be best to draw it as a big fireplace and show us roughly how much space it takes up. But we're not going to expect you to measure every single fireplace in a property or every single window and door. We use icons and symbols that are the standard sizes for windows and doors, and we would expect you to show us roughly the size of it. So you don't have to measure it to be exact, but we would like it to be a representation of roughly how big it is at the property or how much of the wall it actually takes up. And using your floor plan that you've got up, Mimi, the lounge area is a perfect example. We can see that bay window at the front, the window takes up the entirety of that wall or most of that wall. So we could draw it as such, whereas the kitchen window only takes up it's half the size of the wall, but it's bang in the middle of the wall. So that gives us all the information we need to be able to represent those windows slightly more accurately than just putting a sign that says W, for example, because we wouldn't actually see what space it takes up.
Yeah, that's great. That's Hopefully it's very crystal clear for you guys.
It's a very good question, and I think it comes
Yeah.
up quite a lot. But yeah, with all symbols, they are there as a guide. We don't expect you to measure all of those side of things.
Cool. Okay. Is regular tape measure acceptable to take the measurements?
If
I
you
can
are,
answer this one.
yeah, yeah.
We suggest a laser measure as a requirement. It'll make your life a lot easier. Chris, I don't know if you want to expand on that, but
Yeah, I was going to say if you feel that you can get the most accurate measurements with that, then please do show us how.
yeah.
I would suggest that a laser measurer is a lot of the ones on the market right now, and I'm sure some of the ones that we recommend. The accuracy on it is incredibly high, and more importantly, the timing it takes for you to actually do it. It will save a lot of your time. I know people that use both, and by all means, as you get into this process and as you do your 10th, your 20th, your 100th floor plan, you will start to figure out how you can best do this to get accurate results and efficiently. I usually don't like to rule any equipment out for that, but what I would say is absolutely do attempt with a laser measurer, because you'll get the better results faster. And sometimes when you're at a property with a measuring tape, it's, unless you've got someone to hold the other end of it, it's quite a task sometimes. So yeah, I would steer away from that, especially if you're just getting into it.
Okay, another really good question. Do you need garden measurements and structures within the garden like a shed?
Yeah, excellent question. As a standard, no, we don't. However, again, if it is a structure that is of significant importance to the property and the selling of the property, it's probably worth including it. And what I mean by this is, if it is a concrete shed that can't be moved, then obviously I would suggest drawing it as an outline. Some clients request gardens. You will see this information on the actual on the job as it comes over to you, but it is not a standard thing that we offer. So it's very rare that people would actually need to do gardens. If you do see that gardens are a requirement, we only require kind of the back garden, and it's the kind of the general measurement and width of it. So that's the it's on occasions that it would need to be there, but it is entirely dependent on the client, and you should see those notes on the order.
Okay, next question. When measuring a kitchen or bathroom, would you put the distance between the wall and sink, toilet, etc., or if the kitchen units start midway down a wall?
So I think this goes back to the symbol question. They just need to be there for visual representation of where they actually are. We don't need exact measurements of the size of them or the distance of where they are for a wall or anything like that.
Cool. This is a really good question, actually. What's the best way to get the actual footprint of the property? A quick walk around the outside or internally from room to room?
Yeah, great question. Unfortunately, it depends on the property. I would say for larger properties and for more complex properties, go around the entire property and measure each wall kind of internally, and gather that footprint. That will ensure that we have every measurement that we need if you were to do that for every room. That would be the absolute most I would expect. If the bedroom or if the property in itself is quite square, and we get this quite a lot in places like London, where there's a lot of brand new flats being built and they all fit a very similar and basic footprint, it might mean that something like bedroom 2 on Mimi's example, it's just a square room. You know that measuring all 4 of those walls means that you've done the exact same measurement twice in a sense. So you could get away with just doing a depth and a width, but it will depend on the property. And I would say that any time there is something slightly different in a room or slightly different in the shape of a room, you are best measuring essentially all 4, or in bedroom 1's case here, all kind of 5 walls that would be there, just so that you have everything that you've got at the property. All the information you give us is what we use to create the floor plan. So if you think there's any doubt or any question when you're at the property that it might need a little bit more information for us, or a little bit more measurements, then you are our last hope at getting that, really. So we're relying on you to just be able to give us as much information as possible. I do think that there's a within reason on that, and that you don't need to measure every wall if the entire property is square, so to speak. We would just need those width and depths, like I said.
Cool. Okay, we have 1 minute left, so maybe 1 or 2 questions left. This is a good one. How would you approach an angled wall? For instance, would you need to get the exact angle?
All right, yeah, that's a very good question. Again, if we, so let's pretend that to the right of this floor plan that Mimi has, where there's the little focal logo and it's at an angle, let's pretend that this is a room to an extent. So again, the answer would be just to measure every single wall. And the way that I would suggest is one of the walls would usually be straight. There's usually a straight wall in most rooms. If that's not the case, then I'm very sorry. We've sent you to one of probably 5% of the country's most awkward properties, so we apologize for that. But always start with the straight wall and make sure that you have the straight wall to absolute accuracy. It is also very likely that there will be a second straight wall, but if there isn't, then it would just be measure each length of all the other walls. We will then be able to figure it out based on your drawing and your measurements, because as soon as, like, absolute worst case scenario, we could draw each of those walls individually and piece them together, and we would start to understand where they connect, or where that kind of curve, or where that angle actually is. If absolutely necessary and you feel that it is really confusing by doing it each wall and the angle still doesn't exist, then the best way to measure will be corner to corner, and that will then give us a X, so to speak, and that X will show us the kind of like what we expect that floor area to look like when piecing all of the walls together. But generally, I think measuring each wall would suffice and be able to give us the information that we need.
Well, that's great, Chris. Thank you. So that's all the time we have for today. Just to give you a brief outline of our workshops for the rest of the month. Our next one is on window exposure on Wednesday, and you can have a quick look at the rest of for the rest of the month. But every workshop that we're running is at 10 a.m. And you will be sent the links for them. So yeah, so if you can join the next one on Wednesday on window exposure, that will be great. So thank you guys so much for joining us today. We really appreciate you being here, and yeah, hope to see you on the next one. Again, if you have any questions at all, please email recruitment@focalagent.com. Okay, thanks guys. Have a great day. Bye.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.